I want to talk to you about your new book. But I want to, before we do that, if we can. Um, this is many books for you now, and a long time in the public scene. I'm wondering, before we discuss the things that are in this new book, if you take a look back on your views, the things that you've understood, the things that you've communicated, I'm really interested to know, what are the things that you feel like, or if there's anything, that has evolved or changed the most, and what aspect of your understanding has become even more solidified, or what did you start out with that was totally right on from the start, and what do you think is the thing that's changed and grown the most?
Well, I don't think it's about change. I think it's about greater understanding. So when I started out in the early 1990s, I was looking at the manipulation of the world in the world that we see. You mentioned the Trilateral Commission. It was about organizations that you could name, people that you could see. And then the rabbit hole opened up, and it went deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And the deeper you go, the greater perspective you have on what went before. So, yes, there are organizations like the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group, the Council on Foreign Relations, that are manipulating events. But it's not coming from there. There are corporations, of course there are, that are manipulating events. And it's at that level that what you might call the progressives stop. They say, yes, it's the corporations, and it's about more and more money and what have you, and more control of the markets. Well, at one level it is, but it don't start out there. Corporations are not the origin of the manipulation they express. They are a vehicle for it. So what's happened year on year on year on year, right up to present day, is that I've gone deeper and deeper in the rabbit hole and got a greater and greater perspective about the world of the seen by understanding more and more about the world of the unseen. And that's been the journey. So when I look back, I wouldn't say I'd change anything from what I was saying in the early 1990s, but my goodness me, today I would add enormously to it in terms of perspective and where the world of the scene operates when you see what's really behind it. And in terms of the core of it, as you kind of indicated earlier, I would say that it's basically come together, my understanding of how all this works, in one word: perception. This is the stadium on which, or within which, it all plays out. It's a question of who controls our perception. Do we do that? Or do external forces manipulating our perception via manipulating information control our perception? Because from perception comes everything. What we will support, won't support, what we'll do, what we won't do, what we'll challenge, what we won't challenge, what we'll accept, what we won't accept. All this comes from our perception of the situation. And if you break this down, what we're looking at in multiple levels is the hijacking of human perception. Everything from how the Syrian catastrophe really came about, for instance, and the Libyan catastrophe, and the Iraqi catastrophe, and world events and banking crashes, right the way through to the hijacking of the most important perception of all, and that's the perception of who we are and the perception of the very reality and world that we think we're living in. And so that's my focus. It's saying to people that the reason the world is as it is that humanity individually and collectively has had its perception of everything hijacked and replaced with a fake version of what is, and therefore the answer to overcoming that and the consequences of that is to take our perceptions back. And that's the dynamic that I'm most focused on now. And it's because it's about perception that the focus in the conspiracy is so much upon the control of information. You see what's been happening, as you well know, in these years that have recently passed, is that the alternative media in all its forms has challenged, thanks to access to the internet, has challenged the prevailing narrative from which people get their, here we go again, perception of everything. Mm-hmm. And what has happened, of course, is that people have looked at this other way of looking at self and the world and reality, and they've gone, hold on a minute, this makes more sense than I've been told before. And what's happening now is that that beneficial part of the internet is now being targeted with suppression, oppression, censorship, because they are desperate to stop any alternative narrative to that which would otherwise be the only source of perception that people would have.
Okay, so let's talk about, maybe we can step back before we get into the everything that we need to know, but have never been told. Okay, let's step back a little bit, because it's intriguing, and I don't know that I mean as I'm looking back now, I don't know that I've ever seen you delve into this particular question, but the question of if we are returning to where we were in terms of regaining our perception, where was the place where as either a species or the majority, when was it that we lost it? If we were coming from somewhere, when did we lose it, and what was the mechanism by which it was first sort of wrested away from us?
Well, that's a kind of long story, but as brief as I can. A force, an external force to humanity, if you like, has hijacked our perception over a long period of time. I mean, how you break it down into our version of time is quite a challenge, but thousands and thousands of years. This force, which goes under various names in the ancient world, but all of them are talking about the same force, has manipulated humanity to the point where we have completely lost touch with who we are. And this has been done by focusing our attention. There are many various ways it's actually been done, which I go into in detail in the book. It's basically focused our attention on the five sense level of reality. Now we are, I would suggest, if you say who are we are awareness. We are a state of awareness. We are a state of being aware. When people have near-death experiences and leave the body, and they talk about suddenly being able to experience multiple realities in the same moment, in the same now, that's because what's happened is that awareness has withdrawn and been freed from this biological computer we call the body, which focuses our attention on a tiny band of frequency, which is so small, visible light, it's almost laughable. And if that's attention, that focus of the way we perceive the world only stays in the five senses, then what happens? You see yourself only as your labels, as your name, your life story, your race, your religion, your income bracket. You see yourself in five sense terms as little me, as apart from everything else, as someone who has basically no power. And once we reach a situation where we perceive ourselves as apart from everyone else, then you've got all the fault lines of divide and rule that you can play people off against each other. So instead of focusing on the fact that we're all being manipulated, we're too busy fighting each other and being in conflict with each other. So while that attention again is on fighting each other, we don't see the fact that all of us have the same strings attached to the same hands ultimately. And so if you're going to focus people's attention in the five senses, you have to sell them a version of reality, which is what's sold through mainstream science, that this world is physical and solid, that we're basically a cosmic accident that came out of nowhere, somehow get consciousness at birth and then die, and the consciousness disappears, and that's the end of it. 70 years and 10, and that's it. That there's no rhyme or reason for it. That there's no really much point to it, and therefore, with that perception, people see themselves as, like I say, little me, and they don't think they have any power over their lives or any power to impact upon their lives. And so when you're in that situation, what do? You look for people you think do have power, who do know better than you do, and so you give your power away to those you think know more than you do, which are the academics, which are the scientists, which are the people that run the system and the administrators, etc., etc., etc. And so we are constantly living powerless lives because we think we have no power. And we fall into this self-identity that I call phantom self, which is basically all the labels that we give ourselves and people give us. We think that's who we are. It's not. That's what we're experiencing. And what is happening now, because this process of pulling us out of the infinite awareness, the expression of infinite awareness that we all are, this point of attention we all are within infinite awareness, is so important that we are focused on the five senses. We're now seeing more and more the manipulation of people into smaller and smaller and smaller minutiae versions of phantom self. So now we have these long series of letters which are being added to all the time to have to describe our sexuality, our race, or whatever in the minutiae, like I say, of detail. So actually the sense of who we are is getting smaller and smaller and smaller if we fall for it. We're no longer just a man or a woman anymore. We're a certain sexuality of woman. We're a certain sexuality of man and all that stuff. And a certain gender here or whatever there. And what then happens is we pull ourselves further and further in our understanding of self from the awareness that we are into these smaller and smaller and smaller labels. And so what I'm focusing on very much, and have done for a long time, is looking at the nature of reality and the nature of who we are and saying, hey, first of all, we've been sold a complete lie about the nature of reality itself. We're living now in apparently a solid world, and we're interacting with a solid world every day, but the world isn't solid, provable fact. So what else can be incredible and fantastic when we're living in a solid world, we think, and it isn't? And when you look at yourself from a perspective of, I'm not David Icke, I am infinite awareness having an experience called David Icke. having a label called Born in Leicester, England in 1952. That's not me. That's the experience my consciousness is having. And when you come from that point of self-identity, I am consciousness having an experience, instead of identifying the experience as who you are, everything changes. You realize that actually you have infinite power. You have infinite ability to understand, to see the world as it is. And the only thing that's stopping you is your sense of limitation, your sense of, I am little me, I am Ethel, works on the checkout at the supermarket. No, you are infinite awareness having that experience. And this switch in self-identity from the labels to I am infinite awareness is fundamental to breaking this trance that humanity has been put in systematically, so that we believe in a world that doesn't exist, and we have a self-identity that is absolutely not who we are. Again, perception of self, perception of the world. It's been hijacked. It's nothing like we've been told. This is the stadium on which it's being played out, and this is the stadium on which, or in which, this conspiracy will fall. It's no good, thinking we're going to fight the conspiracy by stockpiling weapons and having meetings and someone taking minutes. That's not going to get anywhere. It never has, never will. How many revolutions of that kind have ended up with people in power pretty much like the ones before? It has to be a revolution of perception, a complete transformation of self-identity and an understanding of the world we live in and how we interact with it. That's where the answers lie, and nowhere else.